Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Live with Roger Hanson. Today is another episode with my topic of storytelling, and I have somebody here that I've been wanting to get on here to tell a story for quite a long time, and he has probably one of the coolest stories that you could listen to. So, with that, I am. Well, first, I gotta say hi to Karma, my co host. Hello, Karma.
Hi.
Karma's here. We're both gonna listen in, and at the end of uh, Mr. Mr. Robot's story, he's agreed to let us ask questions and answers. So, with that, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Mr. Robot. Welcome here.
Hello, folks. I appreciate those listening. And where to begin a big story like this? I guess I'll go back to my beginnings. I was born in South Africa. I grew up in apartheid South Africa times when there was big conflicts and big disparity between the white people that were from British descent living in Africa uh, uh, compared to the local populations that lived there, which were uh, a bunch of different tribes. I don't know if you know this, but there's like 14 different languages in South Africa, and only one of them is English. And but anyway, I grew up in a time where uh, there was a lot of racism and a lot of hostility between the colony people and the local population. And it pains me to say, but when you grow up in an environment like that, you as a little kid, you don't know any better, right? So you kind of listen to your elders, which is usually um, your parents and those their friends and those around them, and you kind of pick up the culture that you grow up in. And I picked up a lot of that stuff, that sort of racial hatred, not necessarily hatred, but just like disrespect and things like that as a kid. And it was part of the sort of way you spoke and the jokes that you made, and it was just saturated in the culture. And I didn't really notice it at all until I moved. We my family moved out of South Africa to Australia, and it was completely different there. There was none of that, or so little that I didn't recognize it there. And only then did I realize, like, wow, I've sort of looked down on people my whole life, and I needed to change. And at that point, like in Australia at that time, it's completely unacceptable to be racist. So I worked on myself and I changed those beliefs. And anyway, as I sort of I felt like that helped me grow quite a bit, because I could then empathize with people that were going through similar things, whether it was in Australia between the Australian people and the Indigenous people there. They had a little bit of that going on as well. It wasn't as severe because in South Africa, only like 10% of the population is white, and 90% is brown and black. Whereas in Australia, it's the other way around. It's 90% white people and 10% Indigenous people. And but I could see the same sort of things unfolding that I was going through as a kid. And I felt like I'd sort of grown past that, so it allowed me to have a lot of compassion for people that were going through it. I didn't really demonize people on either side. I sort of felt like I was detached in a way from it because I didn't grow up there. It wasn't my beef. It wasn't my 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 sort of, I wasn't part of the fight or anything, and so I could always be like a bit of a mediator and help people see past those types of situations and beliefs and stuff like that, and it allowed me to actually appreciate the qualities in Indigenous people at that time, and anyway, I'll get back to that and where it sort of led me. But at that point in my life, I was like, in my late teens. I was just starting university, studying to be a doctor, and there came a point in my second year where I was studying medicine, like pharmaceuticals, drugs, how they work, pharmacology, and I was geeking out on it. I've always been a bit of a scientist at heart. I'm a very curious person by nature, and learning how things work in the body was so fascinating to me because you can see how that actually plays out in real life. When you know the things that happen underneath it all, you can see why things happen the way they happen. And so when I was learning pharmacology, it was very interesting because, when you take a medicine or a drug, it has all these different effects and side effects, and you know why they happen because they affect different parts of your own physiology, right? Anyway, so one of my subjects was illicit drugs in med school, and we got to this one subject which was psychedelics, and they said it was very basic. They basically said, you take some of these drugs and they make you hallucinate, and I was like thinking to myself, what is a hallucination? How can it be that you can take a substance and your brain can come up with these fantastical visions or worlds or whatever people see, And I've never experienced that myself, so I sort of just put it down as a bit of a medical mystery and went on with my life, went on with my studies, until one day I met a chemistry student, and he's like, and I was very curious about LSD, and the chemistry student said to me, I don't have LSD, but have you heard of DMT? I'm like, DMT? What's that? I had no idea. This was quite a long time ago, before any of the information that's out on the internet was out. And but I could find a little bits of reports here and there, and I was like, just like looked it up, and unanimously across the board it said it was safe. No one's ever like overdosed on it. There's no real side effects, and I was like, and it only lasts for 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm thinking, oh, that's perfect. I have to go to class tomorrow, so yeah, give it to me. And I made the mistake of not actually looking, because I wanted to have a clean slate. Because one thing I learned in class about psychedelics is if you have a preconception idea about a psychedelic and then you take it, it influences how you experience it because it works through your mind, right? The word psychedelic means mind manifesting. So I wanted to know nothing about it, or as little as possible, before I take it, to have a completely raw, pure experience. Because as a scientist, I was like, I don't want it to be influenced by anything, because then I can understand it more purely, as an observer. And anyway, I sort of sat there with my roommate at the time, and we bought like a pipe, and we just like packed the DMT in there, and we like dressed up the room nice and like colorful and psychedelic and stuff, and my friend had it first. Or actually no, that's not true. I had it first, but I didn't look up how to smoke it properly. So like when it's a DMT is a crystal, when you heat it up, it turns into just like a a liquid, and it just dropped straight through the mesh that was in the pipe, and I barely got anything in me. And then I passed it over to my friend. I felt a little bit like different, but not very. And I gave it to my friend. He had a bit of a bigger smash of it, and then all of a sudden he just gets up, goes over to the sink, and starts vomiting. As he's vomiting, he's just laughing his head off, going, and then he's like, "I've got to go to the toilet," and he leaves the room. And I'm going, "Shit." Well, at least he was laughing, so at least, he must be having a good time. So I'm like, all right, I'll have one more. There's not much left, but I'll have one more try. So I smoke another one, and I look over on the wall, and my friend, he's a tattoo artist, and he had like a yin-yang symbol with two doves up above it. And I kid you not, the yin-yang, with my eyes open, starts spinning on the wall, like, really fast. And the doves just become alive and fly straight off the wall. And I was like, and at that point, like the music, we had some like monk chanting music going on, and all of a sudden, it just got too intense for me in there. I was like, oh, I just felt all this energy. I was like, I can't do it. So I wanted to walk back to my room, and it was literally just like a few meters away, but it felt like forever. And I just walked over there. You know that scene in The Matrix where there's all those doors in that long corridor? It just felt like my hallway stretched out into this infinite long hallway. And then all of a sudden I'm in my room, and I go over to wash my face in the basin that I have in my room. And the basin is tiny normally, but it turned into like the size of a bathtub. It just felt huge. And I look up into the mirror, and I could not recognize myself at all. Like, I just looked like a completely different person. I was like touching my face, going, what the hell? Is this what I look like? It was in complete detail. It wasn't like, fuzzy or anything like that. It was like I was looking at a completely different person. It was so bizarre. And then I look over to where the balcony is, and there was like a yellow sheet draped down as you go out to the balcony, and the sun was kind of shining through the sheet, and the sheet was yellow, but when I was seeing it on DMT, it looked like it was radiating gold, and I was almost like I could look through the sheet into like another world, and in there was like a person in there made out of like energy. But then all of a sudden it stopped. Like the trip was very short, and I was just like, got a little taste of it. I was just like, wow. And I was so happy because I'm like, oh, finally, I've had a hallucination. I get it now, Tick that off the bucket list. I'm done, And I didn't even think about it again for like a very long time. Very long time. I did another couple of years of my studies. I traveled abroad for a while. And then after some time, I come back home, and I'd just been in Amsterdam and all over Europe and things like that. And I got home, and I was like in the outback in Australia, and there's nothing to do there, right? You're just out in the middle of nowhere. And I was kind of bored, so I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, there was that DMT thing. I forgot about that. Isn't that in trees? And it turns out that DMT is actually in our national tree, like the acacia tree. So I was like, oh, it's in acacia trees. They're everywhere. So I'll just go out and go get some. So I walk out into the bush, find myself a random tree, and cut the bark off it, and I take it home. And because I know a little bit of chemistry and stuff, I did an extraction on it. And it turns out that I only learned this much later on, that DMT only occurs in about 1 or 2% of acacia species, and Australia has about 2,000 different acacia species. And it turned out, by some miracle, I had selected the right acacia tree that no one had ever discovered before in that region. to have DMT in it, and I just got lucky. And there was a bit of DMT in there, but it was a huge process, and I finally, after 24 hours of work, I ended up with like one tiny teaspoon worth of this stuff, and it smelled like DMT, but I didn't really know. And then, but I didn't want to like let all this work go to waste, so I just sort of like, but it wasn't a crystal like it should be. It was like an oil. I'm like, how do you smoke an oil, you know? So I just like put a little bit on some alfoil and I heat it up, which you should never do because the alfoil also goes into your brain, and that's not good for your brain. But I didn't know that at the time. And I got this tiny whiff of it, and I was listening to MIA Paper Planes with a visualizer going on iTunes or something like that. And the visualizer was actually coming out of the screen like little particles going around my brain, going around my head, and I could see all these different, what do you call it, like different objects coalescing with these molecules smashing together, like random things like a cupcake and a hammer, and different objects would just like formulate in front of my eyes. And it was pretty amazing, but then it was over. And I was like, oh, damn, I want to see more of it, but it was so much work. So anyway, over the years, I got a little bit better at it, and I had a little bit more to play with. And once I did, I was by myself in this house that I was renting for a while. And I had no responsibilities at the time. I took a little bit of a gap year off my studies, and I had some time to sort of reflect on it. And what I noticed was I kept seeing things that in my visionary trips that I didn't believe in, which was a surreal experience to have, because normally you would expect to see, like, if your brain is just getting jumbled and you're seeing a hallucination, you would expect to see things you do believe in, or things that your brain can conceive of. But what I found is I would often see things that I have never even considered, or things that I didn't think was real, or things that I couldn't even imagine normally, like colors that I've never seen before, shapes that are hyperdimensional and I'm, fourth, fifth dimensional shapes or something like that. And I was just like, whoa. And then I realized something that was very profound for me was, maybe I don't know everything, maybe I should just keep more of an open mind, and I'd be able to process this information a bit better, because I found my brain was like forgetting a lot of the stuff that I'd see, because there's nowhere to put it in my brain. If your brain is a filing cabinet and you're organizing it from A to Z, and you see something that's outside of that A to Z range, your brain puts it somewhere random, and you have no easy way of recalling it because it's so strange, right? And I started to see things that I feel changed me for the better. I had some experiences where I had like an ego death, and I literally felt like I was going to die. And I felt like I did die. And I felt like when I was in this space of, I guess, the spirit world, I realized something that's still with me today, which is there is life beyond death. And before this, I was like an atheist, like very scientifically minded atheist. I would debate Christians until they cry, But then I realized there's life beyond death. And if that's true, then death is not something to worry about. It's just another part of life, because then you just transition. You're not dying per se. And it allowed my mind to relax to a degree that I've never felt before, where I was able to drop some of my bigger fears. And no one really thinks about dying all the time, but it still seems to like have some kind of drag on your mind in a way. And then I started getting into the practice of like facing my fears, because you'll find as you explore these types of substances, your ego will start to fight you, because your ego does not like to be out of control. When your brain knows it's about to be out of control, it'll try to resist. And so I had to get into this practice of like letting go of my fear, letting go of my anxieties, and just going with the flow of what happens. And I'd sort of say a little mantra to myself, which is like, I've had a good life so far, and if I die right now, I'll be a happy person because I've experienced like truly magical things. And it got me to this point where I realized I could bring back information from the spirit world, and it would teach me stuff. It started with very basic lessons, like what are hyperdimensional shapes, what are hyperdimensional colors, and then eventually, after a long while of exploring, I started to see these entities, these beings that exist in this other world. And I just found it fascinating. I was constantly exploring it at that time, and I realized I could ask questions, and more often than not, the answer would come to me. And if it didn't come to me like straight away, it would sort of unfold in my life within a very short period of time. And yeah, I would say from that point on, I would have considered myself a spiritual person, because I believed in spirits. I believed in the spirit world, and I still felt like a baby in understanding it. I couldn't often even find the words to describe it. It's so surreal, so magical, so majestic. It's it's beyond words, really. So I often had to find make up words to describe these things. Um, and it sort of started to hear it made me realize another few things as well, which was I realized why I was doing the degree I was doing at the time, and I realized I was doing it for the wrong reasons, which was um, I thought that studying medicine would um, bring me closer to my dad, because we never really got along. We never really saw eye to eye, and he's a lovely person, but he's also very cold towards me. Towards Yeah, and so and then I also realized I actually underwent some childhood trauma that I wasn't consciously aware of. But through these taking these plant medicines, I realized I did have a big part of my emotional bandwidth was shut down, and that's why. And it all started to make sense, because I was always a bit of a very cold, direct, analytical person, and I wouldn't to me feelings and emotions didn't matter at that time, and to me it was just a distraction. It was like whatever. I actually didn't even believe in feelings. I'd often say that. I'd be like, "What do you mean feelings? Show me a feeling. What is it?" And anyway, as I started to heal my heart through these intense psychedelic experiences, I could literally see it unblocking energy pathways inside my system, inside my heart, And it sounds so cliche, cheesy, but at the same time, it's so real. And I think that's why it's in our language, that person is cold-hearted, that person has a big heart, Um, we just intuitively know these things because we often feel it, And I realized another thing is that in my friends' circles, the people who had more emotion could think faster, and their memories were better. And to me, that was a very desirable thing, which caused me to move towards this type of healing stuff more, because I figured the more I could heal my heart, the better I could be as a person. Not just like initially it was about wanting to improve my thought processes, be smarter, be like faster at understanding things and so on. But then I realized even more powerful thing was to be able to connect with others. And at that time, I started to grow my own psychedelic medicines because in Australia it's not actually illegal to grow them. As long as you don't take them, it's legal. So I had quite a nice psychedelic garden at that time, you know, cactus and Mimosa hostilis and a whole bunch of other like exotic plants. And I was growing ayahuasca too. And then I I was so interested in this stuff. I decided I wanted to do a project on it, a research project for university for medicine. And I was looking online and I found that there was like one researcher in Australia that was looking into ayahuasca. And I was like, oh, it turned out this researcher was from my university. And I'm like, what are the chances of that? I was like, okay. So I basically called him up. I'm like, hey, can I interview you for this project? He's like, sure, come for lunch. We had a nice chat. I got my data. And then he's like, hey, do you want to come to a little party on the weekend? I was like, oh yeah, for sure. I really wanted to get to know this guy a bit better. So I said like, yeah, sure. And so when the day came, he's like, oh yeah, a friend of mine is going to come pick you up. And a guy rocks up at my house and he comes in and he just has like 1 second peek out my back door. He's like, oh, what are you growing back there? I'm like, oh, don't worry, you wouldn't understand. He's like, oh yeah, try me. So I mentioned one of the exotic plants that I had. He's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I'm like, what? How do you know what that is? I mean, at that time, no one knew about this stuff. No one knew about DMT. It was like, I felt like I was the only person in the world almost that knew about this. I couldn't find anyone. I couldn't find any information on it. Anyway, he starts taking me to this, what I thought was a house party. And it turned out it wasn't a house party. It was a festival out in the bush. In Australia, we call them bush doofs. And as we're talking, it was like a 5-hour drive out to this festival. And as we're talking, I realized this guy is also a researcher. And he's actually, turned out he's like the premier researcher in these psychedelic plants in Australia. And so I felt like the gods have literally put this guy in front of me because this is exactly what I was studying and needed to know, man, you know. And anyway, he taught me a lot of things and introduced me to a lot of really cool people. And from then on, I was like in touch with all the best researchers in that field, and I was going to conferences on it and all sorts of things. And I had a really amazing time with it until I eventually decided I want to travel over to South America and see where this stuff comes from, you know. So before I even did all that, I started to not be able to focus on my studies as much because I felt like I was an astronaut exploring space. To me, this was so important because I'm seeing things that possibly no one has ever seen before. You know, I figured, you know, any Joe Blow can become a doctor and do that, and people have done it plenty of times. But what I'm doing right now, no one has really done. So to me, it sort of took a higher priority. And at the same time, as my mind was expanding, I became interested in all sorts of other topics of research that I was never into before. And especially mysterious things, because my mind had opened up to the mysteries, right? Because I've started to see things that look like magic to me. So I'm like, well, if I'm recognizing this stuff now, what else in history has happened that includes and this sorts of phenomena that I just totally didn't understand back then. So I started investigating all sorts of mysteries in the past, and that's why I'm so much into the history and stuff now. But especially like I started researching all the different religions and their sort of relics and their art, and I've started to notice like phenomena that I was seeing in my trips. I would see in the walls of temples. I would see it in the art of the Buddhists, and the Muslim temples, and all over the place. And I realized I'm not the only one that has seen this stuff. This has always been around. And I started also to realize when I started going to these festivals, I would have like short periods of telepathic communication with people, and that made me realize that we as humans are so much more than what we grow up to believe we are, and especially us Westerners, we get brought up in this like very limited paradigm compared to what the indigenous people of the world has sort of experienced for thousands of years. And I think that actually shuts down a lot of our higher functioning, which is our pineal gland, for example, where our natural DMT gets produced. It's where the Hindus put the dot on their heads, between their eyebrows. That's where your pineal gland is in your brain, right in the very center of your brain. And it actually doesn't originate from the brain. It's not brain tissue. It is actually, when you're an embryo, it originates from the palate, the roof of your mouth, and it shoots up into your brain, and it becomes a transmitter of hormones between your brain and your blood. And it's the only part of your brain where there's that brain-blood interface. And so in my research, I found out that it actually turns out the enzymes required to synthesize DMT is all inside the pineal gland, except for one. It's called INMT, indole methyl transferase, and it sits in the lungs. It's in high quantities in the lungs. Now, when you look at things like pranayama yoga, for example, where they breathe really fast, they often report going into these trance-like states where it's quite psychedelic for them. And to me, like, the physiology makes sense, and I love it when stuff like that happens, where spirituality meets science and it all just like clicks in and makes sense. So I got interested, and looking at Randall Carlson's and Graham Hancock's information, looking at Atlantis and the end of the Ice Age and the big cataclysms that happened then. If you guys don't know about it, I highly recommend you check it out on YouTube. And Joe Rogan did a really good interview with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. Check it out. But I wanted to go and see it for myself, so I saved up over a few years enough money to go and travel to South America. And I traveled all the way from the border of Canada, where I went to a festival where there was a full solar eclipse. So epic. I got to smoke DMT right in the middle of the eclipse. Don't recommend it, but I had to see. And then I traveled all the way down to South America, collected some toad DMT in North Mexico in the Sonora Desert. And then I carried that DMT with me down to Peru, where I got to sit in these ancient temples and smoke it, which was pretty epic. Especially with toad DMT, it's called 5-methoxy DMT, 5-meo DMT. It's not as visually stimulating as the tree DMT, NN DMT, but it actually gives you like superpower of intuition. Like your intuition just goes through the roof, or whatever you want to call it. You just get like information downloads, right? So like the native people used to use it to go hunting. They would ask the spirits like, where can we go hunting to find food, and they would just know, and for me, I was interested in how these ancient temples worked. I spent quite a few days walking around there, and I couldn't figure it out. And that night I sat in one of the temples and I smoked this DMT, and instantly I knew exactly how this temple worked, and I was just like, whoa. So yeah, that stuff was really amazing. Eventually I came home, and I started working at music festivals, like teaching people about how drugs work, how to take them safely, how to minimize risks and stuff like that. I wanted to give back to the people a little bit of what I've experienced and learned. And yeah, this is, as my heart is growing, I realized, that we are really, there is no such thing as separation. Separation is a belief of the mind, but not a fact of reality. And when you go into some of these higher states of consciousness, you can actually experience what it means to be in oneness with the universe, with nature, with others. And I realized all humans are actually one consciousness. That's how telepathy works, is that they are a part of you. And it made me realize there's no point to hate someone or to even like judge someone, because really I just see everyone as a part of me now. And if I don't like something in someone else, it means there's a part of me that I don't like. And I always try to just either learn from it or try to resolve it in myself, drop the judgments. And it frees up your mind a lot to be able to do other things as well. And it just turns you into a better person, not an asshole. And yeah, and then, as I traveled around the world quite a bit, and I'm in India right now, and I realized like people are basically the same everywhere. Cultures are different, some beliefs are different, but man, we all have the same basic needs, wants, desires. We all function the same, so like it just makes sense. And actually, we all come from the same genetic stock once upon a time. It doesn't matter who we are, we all were once fucking monkeys. or whatever, but we sort of came from mostly the same genetic stock. Like when these big cataclysms happened, for example, only like 12,000 years ago, it killed off most of the humans on the planet. There was only about 40,000 humans on the entire planet 12,000 years ago. So all these billions and billions of people on the planet today came from those 40,000 humans back then. So we're not that much different. And yeah, and it's caused me to grow a big love for humanity. I'm I'm not going to go too much into the esoteric stuff today, but I just wanted to communicate like how important it is for us to come to this realization of being able to love each other as one big family, because that's what we are, man. We're one big human family. There's no such thing as races. That's just words. There's no such thing. It's literally just a belief. When it comes down to science and genetics, there's just expression of different alleles, right? Different expressed genes. But really, our genes are 99.9999% the same. Those tiny little differences are just different genes that get expressed, like when a rose goes pink or red or white, they're still all roses. And to say that a red rose is a different race from a white rose makes absolutely no sense when you think of it scientifically. Okay, it's just the expression of a different allele, genetic allele. All right, so that means we can drop all this bullshit that keeps us in separation, because the people that are trying to take over the world bank on that. They want us to be separated because it's easier to take over a people, or control a people when you've divided them. The old axiom of divide and conquer, right? And so for us to create love and unity and cooperation amongst each other will just make this planet a lot stronger. And that's exactly what we need right now, especially with this crisis, all these crises going on around the world. I mean, I can't even label them all. There's so many. And the only way we're going to be able to resolve any of them or all of them is if we work together. And yeah, I'm very passionate about creating unity amongst my peers, my friends. Right now, our plan in Australia is to create self-sustainable communities, growing our own food, and then hoping to employ our friends and expand into more communities, and basically just get rid of all of the not get rid of, but create new systems that we require to live, so that we're not dependent on the ones our governments give us. Because if we are dependent on our governments for our ability to live, then we're under their control. And so we are looking to help set ourselves free through cooperation, cooperative projects, enterprises, stuff like that. And as I'm traveling around, I just see so many people have the same idea, are ready to do it, abroad and at home. So yeah, I'm excited to just sort of be the cog in the wheel and go between places and help people where I can. And I it so happens that when you start making these sorts of plans, the universe starts to conspire in your favor, and you start running into the right people at the right time, synchronistically, to make these things happen. And so far so good. This is what's happening to me now. Is I just met the right people at the right time, and yeah, now we're moving forward. And I will hopefully be able to share the journey with you guys through my radio show, Hacker Radio. I'm sure the name will change in the future, but at the moment, that's where it's at. I'm starting with music because I find music brings people together. It's the one thing that we can all agree on is awesome. Music and food. So yeah, I'm starting just blasting the tunes out there, and as things come online, I will start little shows like this and just chat and share, and hopefully live stream some of the things I do. One of my goals is to go into the northern jungles of Australia and go live with the indigenous people for a while. Because they have these ancient stories there that are like 40 to 60,000 years old, and they have no written language. So these stories have been passed down generation to generation for like 6,000 people, you know, and no one has ever recorded these things. And I could be the first to like go there and interview these people and get this stuff online, because it will blow your mind. Some of the things these Aboriginal people can tell you, they talk about aliens and spirits and magic and all sorts of things that we're only just starting to become aware of. These people have known about it for like 40,000 years, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm very excited. And some of the things that I've learned matches up with the things that they're telling me. So I'm very excited to go and try and document some of that. But anyways, guys, I've been up for all night, for longer than 24 hours. So I'll leave it there for now, and to be continued. We'll talk about something else next time.
Okay, so are you okay with questions and answers though?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Shoot.
All right. So you were talking, and the one thing that I would like, well, Carmen can ask questions too. She's in here too. But the one thing that I do want to ask you about that you didn't bother to mention was you've mentioned in conversations with us before about remote viewing. Is there
Yeah.
is there a way that you could kind of cover a little bit about that, and maybe if you have
Sure.
any experiences concerning that, could you say a little bit about
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of these things came out of my own personal experiences first, because I didn't really believe in this stuff. And when you don't believe in something, you don't really go and chase it up. So what happened is I had a ketamine trip one time where I had an out of body experience. And this happened quite a few times in a row, actually. And until one time, I went out of my body, and um, I went across the world, and I was up in the Himalayas in my mind's eye, and I could see like monks sitting there praying. I could see the smoke from their incense. I could see the like little prayer flags and stuff around them, and all this stuff, and it was quite interesting. And as I was sort of researching online about out of body experiences, I came across this thing called remote viewing, and it I did a little bit of a deep dive into it, and it turns out there was this guy that coined it. His name is Ingo Swann. He wrote a really interesting book that you can find online. It's called Penetration, which is about penetrating the veil of reality and being able to. He used to sit on stage, and people will ask him to go look at something, and he can go anywhere in the universe and look at it, and when these military people found out about it, they basically asked him, "Can you look at what's on the dark side of the moon?" And he said he saw like a base there, like a structures there, and they like, "What? How do you know about that? It's meant to be a secret, right?" And so these like intelligence CIA type people took him into an underground bunker and basically got him to teach them how to do it. And it became a training program in the military, U.S. military, on how to do this out of body travel, remote viewing stuff. And because this was during the Cold War, and the Yankees were really interested in spying on the Russians at that time. And so this was their motivation to do it, because they could get really accurate information between a bunch of remote viewers that do it in a scientific setting, which means they're doing it blind. When they're doing it blind, they're not allowed to know what they're looking at. They're only allowed to get the case number associated with what they're looking at. So their minds can't make a story up about it. And yeah, they got quite good at it. Eventually, some of these people broke out of the military and taught it to some civilian remote viewers. And these civilian remote viewers ended up doing it scientifically for the betterment of humanity and stuff like that. I've been following those guys for about 15 years now, and they come up with amazing stuff that I think everyone should get into, because it's the only way that we can find stuff out that you couldn't normally find out, like historical information, what someone was thinking 50 years ago, what's going to happen next year, all sorts of things, because they found out it's not just that you can look anywhere on the planet, you can look anywhere in time, because time is really just a location in hyperspace. So they found they could go back in time and find out anything they want, and then they found out they can go forwards in time and that's when it gets weird because time isn't fully written yet when it's you go forward in time, so they can get fairly accurate information, but it's not 100% because there's multiple timelines going into the future. But as you go into the future, that collapses down into one timeline. And but they're getting really good at it. Like they have these guys called Farsight. You can go to farsight.org or you can find them on YouTube. And they have this show where they do next month's news this month. So every month they'll predict what's going to be the headlines of next month's news, and you can check it out and you can verify it for yourself. And it just blew my mind for so many years of just seeing them nail it time after time after time. Eventually, your brain is just like, "Well, this can't be a coincidence anymore." It's like the chances of it being a coincidence is like infinitesimal. So I got into it, and I've done a little bit of remote viewing training, but I haven't like heavily made it a habit of mine. But I want to because I know I'll be good at it. The amount of experiences I've spontaneously had with it, as my system is clearing out and healing, my third eye vision is just getting clearer and crisper and finer detail. So like if I could get them remote viewing down reliably, I think I'd be very good at it, and be a handy skill to have. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now, later on, man, if you have the link or anything to some of those sites, you can post it up in our live with Roger Hansen thing if you want to.
Yeah, man, I'll do it straight after this. If you, I can lend you my login because they got the free stuff on YouTube, but then they got some of the bigger projects on Farsight Prime, which is their own website, because YouTube was starting to like censor them and limit them and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
I remember they were doing it on Facebook too with them, and a lot of the people that believe in the secret space program were getting hassled. So
that was the most interesting part is some of these old school remote viewers, they didn't even believe in any of this stuff, secret space program or anything.
Yeah.
And then they kept seeing aliens in their remote viewings, and you could just see it on his face. He's like fully shocked. He's like, I don't know what I'm seeing here. Like, I'm just going to draw it.
Yeah.
And they're drawing like these aliens, and it's just coming up so often. And they realize that aliens are super freaking common, man. Like, they're everywhere. Like, we are not alone. So yeah, it's getting really freaking interesting where they're actually having telepathic conversations with the aliens now, and like yeah, basically finding out how things work in the universe. It's super cool.
I'm wanting to double check. Karma, are you still awake?
Yeah.
Okay. I just
Yes,
wanted to
I
double
am.
check because you're like really quiet. Do you have any comments you want to make before I ask another question? Or any
No,
questions?
I was just listening. It was interesting to hear. No, I don't have any questions.
You
Fantastic, because I think my brain is about to give in anyway.
I've got
But
one
he
more.
does.
I got one more thing that I want to ask because you've
Sure,
covered
man.
a lot of it. But I was wondering, like, I want you to kind of break it down a little bit on these spiritual entities and manifestations you were talking about. You know what
Sure.
I'm saying? Because
Sure.
I've heard you like really get specific about them at times. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
could you
Well,
point out some specifics about certain
I
spirits?
treated it like a scientific almost adventure because I wanted to know how this stuff worked. And what I found was in the beginning, I was seeing. So let's say there's a hierarchy of extra dimensional creatures. Okay, just like a living thing would inhabit any habitat on Earth. You know, they specialize to their habitat, right? And so in these higher planes of existence, you get different degrees of creatures. Okay, you get the basic ones that feed on energy and stuff like that. And some of them, they only exist for as long as they can get some energy off you or off something. And then you get others that are slightly more advanced, where they persist and they attach to people or they attach to places and they live there because there's an energy reservoir for them to feed from. And then you get even higher order beings that are more intelligent than us, and they operate at higher frequencies usually, which is usually outside of this dimension. So you got to understand. Bashar does a good section on it where, and you'll experience this if you ever take a psychedelic, where reality is almost like a radio where if you're on a channel, it's very crisp and clear. But as you dial it up in frequency to the next channel, you'll get into the zone between channels, and that's a different density, but still within that dimension. Okay, let's say you can still hear the music, but it's a bit scratchy. But you're now on a higher frequency, so you're starting to hear some of the next channel, but you still can hear some of the previous channel. So you're in this between state, and so in one dimension of reality, let's say the third dimension, you can get multiple levels of density within that dimension until you go on to the next octave of existence, which is the next dimension, let's say the fourth dimension. And within that dimension, you'll get multiple densities until you go up to the next octave, which is the fifth dimension, okay? And it keeps going on like this. And beings that operate in the fifth, sixth, up dimensions, for them, 1 second in our time is a long time for them in their time. So that from our perspective, they operate really fast. And, so like, it's kind of like a quantum computer can do so many processes in the time it takes us to do one. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's the fundamental of it. And then the other side of that is also, think of like Star Wars. You get the light and the dark side of the Force, where you have beings, and even in our realm too, people are like this as well, where you get beings that serve themselves, and you get beings that serve others. And that's the according to the Law of One channeling book, that's the fundamental difference between the different polarities of beings. Okay, so some are like benevolent and wanting to help out of love, and others are malevolent and wanting to dominate and control. Okay, yeah. And the old Hermetic axiom that is, I think Thoth said this, or Hermes, he said that what is above is that like that which is below, and that is what is below is like that what is above, which just means what you see down here, you'll see up in space with the aliens. What you see in space with the aliens, you'll see into the higher dimensions as well. You know, it's a fractal going all the way up. And yeah, so the main thing from it, the advice that I would give is to eliminate fear, because fear brings you into a denser vibration, a lower vibration, and that tends to magnetize negative experiences towards you. Until you learn to transcend those experiences, you can increase your frequency and as you go into the higher dimensions, the lower density beings can't interact with you anymore. They need to find a way to bring your energy down to be able to interact with you. So before I knew about all this stuff, I never had a bad trip because I didn't believe they existed. And so I was never worried about it until, a fear crept in, and then all of a sudden you can like interact with some like strange, ugly looking beings. But even when I see that stuff, nowadays I don't even get scared anymore. I just accept it for what it is, and I just look at it and try to like investigate, or if I feel real bad about it, I'll walk away or whatever. But I don't tend to get afraid of anything like that, because ultimately I know you can kill a person, but you can't kill a soul. We're all infinite gods, and there's no such thing as death. So why be afraid?
Yeah.
We're gonna live forever.
Now,
So yeah,
when you mentioned like fear, and then you mentioned egotism and stuff, like whenever I was in recovery, we had to deal with the fear aspect of it, and they also mentioned like pride, you know, and egoism. Like I had to learn that through pride that was going to be my downfall, and like with your ego, your your pride is going to kill you. You know what I'm saying? That's what it really came down to me, and I had to learn to be humble, and that
the
was the
universe will humble you eventually. That's why they say pride comes
exactly.
before the fall. You know,
I
because
mean, if you play
when you're
along with
young, your ego builds up on all these false premises, and
right,
then something rattles you to the core, and you realize that you're living a lie, and you have to build yourself back up from true integrity,
right.
and that's when you become a solid human. You know?
And a lot of people have this idea like there's a positive form of pride, and that's not true. It's all false pride. I mean, just plain simple. If you're proud about something, it's all about your ego. It has absolutely nothing to do with reality. You know what I mean? It's just false pride. You know, I mean, it's great that you do good things. You know what I'm saying? But there's nothing to be
Yeah, I
proud
tend to
for.
agree with you. Actually,
You know,
I tend to agree with you. That makes sense.
um,
Because yeah, if you do something for the love of it, you don't really inflate your ego about it. You know, it's
exactly.
um, you're
And
just doing it out of you're expressing love rather than doing it to look good or feel good or whatever. You know.
and
Um,
that I was also taught like with fear, you know, like anger. When people feel anger, they feel hate, stuff like that. It's usually fear based, and
but here's the thing, right? Don't demonize any of these emotions because
well,
each of them is a lesson, a universal lesson for your soul, and
mm-hmm,
you only by experiencing it can you really fully understand it. And as you understand it, you can transcend it. Okay, so I do this thing called fear yoga, where at the end of the day, I'll write down all the fears that I experience throughout the day, whether it's like a social fear of like whatever, or and then on the other side of the page, I'll write down the belief that is required for that fear to exist. So I'll ask myself, in order to be afraid of, let's say, talking to a pretty girl, what would I have to believe about myself to have that fear? And I'll write it down. And then, opposite to that, I will write down the opposite belief that makes more sense. Because often when you bring a belief into your conscious mind knows whether it makes sense or not. And what makes more sense, your brain will always latch onto that. So
mm-hmm,
once you write down a belief next to another belief that makes more sense, your brain latches onto that, and it becomes the new operating system that you operate from. So
right.
I found through doing this process, you can actually eliminate beliefs by just changing your beliefs.
Well, you
You
understand that
can't. You can't.
you're actually like describing a spiritual principle, though, right? I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's not like
Because in the beginning, I tried to just get rid of beliefs, but you can't do that because your brain needs a belief to be able to exist, and so
like
it's
what's
better
the
to
opposite?
replace a belief than
What's
try to eliminate it.
what's the opposite of hate?
Um,
No, come on, you know this. What's the
to me, hate is fear, right?
what's the opposite of it?
Hate is a fear-based, like a downstream of fear. So
Would you say love is the opposite of hate?
I used to say that, but now I think love is such a mystery to me that I can't be 100% certain about it because I'm constantly learning more and more about love, and to me it's still up for grabs. I'm still a student at the feet of love, so maybe you could tell me.
It's the opposite of to
Well, I do notice that the thing is, hmm,
yeah,
yeah, I tend to agree. I tend to agree. It's like when you're in a loving state, you can't be in a state of hate at the same time.
they can't occupy the same space. You're exactly right. And
No, no.
what you've been discussing right there, I just wanted to point that out. That's a spiritual principle that it doesn't run through like one religious belief or spiritual belief. It's in every belief. The opposite.
Here's another here's another cool trick I found out is if your brain is running away with you, say you're in a state of fear or hate or something like that, all those things exist through thought. Okay, so if you can just focus on your breathing and nothing else, like super focus on your breathing and the sensation of breath coming in and out of your nose, you can actually stop thinking. And when you stop thinking, those feelings go away, the emotional chemicals settle, and you calm down. You know,
Yeah,
so that's been very useful for me.
I learned two things about fear: face everything and recover, or fuck everything and run. That's it. That's all I
Fight or
know.
flight.
Yep, fight or flight. That's what it.
Face or flight.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, if I at one time if I was afraid of something, I would freaking bam, I was gone. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, it's an instinct.
but if you want to be better, you want to do better for yourself and the people around you. You know, you learn how to recover from your fear. You know, don't let it dominate you and dictate everything in your life. So
Emotions. Emotions are so powerful, you know, but they come about through thought. Okay, so thought precedes emotion, and if you can calm your thoughts down, you can calm your emotions down.
that's what
It's an important practice to not be ruled by your emotions,
that's why I
but to
like
still learn
listening to
from them
you,
and
man.
accept them.
I know you're probably wondering what the hell is this guy always talking about? He's always against me on this and against me on that. But I love listening to you talk because you say stuff like that. You know what I mean? That's fundamental stuff that people really do need to know. You know?
I always welcome challenge as well. You know, I often play devil's advocate because I can see both sides of an argument, and I will often take the opposite side just to have a conversation. Because I feel like when you have a conversation about something, it reveals more, and to me, that's the most important thing.
But I don't ever want you thinking that you can't have a discussion with me about anything I disagree with you on, okay?
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
Because freaking I do respect you and I like the stuff that you're saying because I mean I love it. First of all, even if I don't agree with it, freaking it's cool shit. You know, I mean you can't freaking help but want to sit around. We were talking about Dogman the other day, you know, and nobody came up with Dogman for cryptids before 1985 or 86. You know, and me honestly. I don't care if it's fake or not. I love them freaking Dogman stories. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man,
I
the
love it.
mystery, anything mysterious is like food for me. I love it.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, um, but
Oh,
I
it's
was
the spice of life.
I was hoping to maybe go over stuff with Atlantis too, but we could do that at a later
We should do
time.
a whole session on that.
Okay,
I got a whole PowerPoint on it too. We could go through that.
that'd be great. We could do it at another
Yeah,
time.
man.
I
Yeah,
now
yeah.
I'm gonna put this with my storytelling stuff because you said a lot of good stuff about your life. And next time when I have you on, we'll discuss Atlantis and we'll do it on the strangeness. Or actually, we could do it on conspiracy too. Even
Cool. Sounds good.
so we can break that down and
Well,
go.
I've got to say, Roger, I love what your work and what you're doing and your open style of communication and yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing, man. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here, man. This has been cool. I loved it.
Yeah, it was a great interview. It was nice to listen to your experiences.
Uh, Thanks for being here, Karma. We'll talk again soon, hey? Well, signing off. Talk to you guys later.
Have a good
Bud.
night.
Peace and love to the universe. Love you all. Bye.
And thank
See
you
you
for being
later.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here too, Karma, okay?
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'll see you soon.
All right.
Have a good night.
Oh. I have to apologize about that. I did not mean to cut you off, Karma. I didn't know you was getting ready to say something, okay?